So I've been playing the Sherberg a little bit recently. I'm trying to grind myself up to the tier 9 so I have enough XP by the time that releases next update. But, well, if you're wondering how it's going, I can sum it up in 2 clips from this game. Here's one. Yeah, the armor seems to be not very good, and that's because it really isn't. And number 2 is the guns are lacking in accuracy. The unfortunate thing is this also comes with a ship that has a long reload. So it feels to me like it's a battleship with poor armor. It is fast, yes, and it does have all right concealment. It's 12.2, I think, something like that. So the problem, though, I've been having with the Cherbourg is the inconsistency. As many of you know, that's something that really frustrates me about ships, and well, I guess that comes with the territory, with this ship being a tier 8 cruiser with 305mm guns and 50k HP stock, and it even comes with a heal. It's a weird ship, I gotta be honest. This line, I'm not sure I could really recommend to people to play yet, but I'm gonna continue working my way through it. We end up with 73k damage this game, and we're actually second on XP. So the games are going okay, but they're frustrating. That's really what it comes down to. I'm getting okay damage, especially for a tier 8 cruiser, and I'm getting all right XP rewards, to be honest, but the experience is pretty frustrating for me. It might also come down to the matchmaker. I've had mostly tier 10 games recently in the Sherberg. I ended my last session off with 4 tier 10 games in a row. It did not go very well. But here I'm trying to play a little bit aggressive. Sherberg doesn't have radar, it doesn't have DPM, so the way you have battle impact in a ship like this that purely relies on dealing damage is to deal damage to targets that matter. So we're trying to deal damage to destroyers here. This is something that I've talked about in Atago videos, especially Venezia, Zao videos, where the ships have really high alpha, the ability to sneak up a little bit on capture zones. Go in with your destroyers and get a salvo off on the enemy DD. It's a great way to start off a game for some pretty high battle impact, even for ships that don't have radar. Unfortunately, in this case, we really weren't able to do that. Although our game is kind of carried by this one salvo. You'll see what I mean later on, but 40k damage right there. I wish that happened more often. I wish it was a little more consistent. I will definitely take it. But that was really my best salvo of the entire time I've been playing the Sherberg. I haven't played it a ton, given, but this ship is plagued with inconsistency. And it doesn't have the armor to really push in very aggressively, since battleships are going to be overmatching it pretty much everywhere. And it doesn't really have the ability to hang with cruisers, because the DPM of cruisers is going to outdo this thing quite heavily. It's got a lot of HP to work through, to be fair, but those fires last quite a long time on this ship, so high DPM fire spammers can definitely do a number to this thing. You'll notice my timing on the damage controls. That's one of the reasons I wanted to include this game. There's a submarine that's stalking me through the middle of the map here. Timing your damage control to dodge torps can be very valuable, but you have to set it up properly to begin with. And unfortunately, it's very difficult to do without a hydro to give you an advanced warning of where those torps are coming from. But I'll show a few other times in this game where I do happen to be able to dodge the torpedoes. It really revolves around playing around islands and having a ship with decent maneuverability. Yeah, we managed to take out the Pomeranian into his superstructure, so the guns aren't a lost cause. They're just plagued with inconsistency, unfortunately. Turning in, though, you notice the rudder shift with this build is pretty good, and the turning radius is especially quite amazing. So it's not like this ship can't tank, it just has to tank through dodging salvos. It can't actually physically get hit, otherwise you're going to take a lot of pen damage. Unfortunately for us, we are getting forced away from the caps, so it's a little harder to hit some DDs, but I'm still trying to focus them. That's really important to do in a cruiser with a long reload that doesn't really have much battle impact outside of its damage. Like I said, dealing damage to DDs whenever possible is very, very important. Here's another example of dodging submarine torps here. I get a little bit distracted by the enemy DD, but I do notice on the map the sub pop up, and of course I hear the ping. I damage con right away since I know I can out-accelerate these torpedoes. I got my speed boost up and I was able to dodge in time. But like you see, it really revolves around island usage. The only reason I was able to sneak out from under those torpedoes is that the sub didn't have a good angle for me, right? The island was blocking his angle to lead my ship in any way at all. So around subs, that's really my best advice right now, is to be playing a reasonably maneuverable ship with hydro and playing around islands. And if you don't have that, you got to play around teammates or just kind of run. Although that doesn't really work too well either, since they can just chase you a lot of the time. This was a very disappointing set of circumstances. I was really hoping the little bit of overmatch that the Sherberg does have would come into play here against this San Diego. San Diego, like Atlanta, has an above water citadel that isn't very well protected, and I was really trying to hit it. And if not hit it, I was hoping for at least some full pen, since he's at a pretty strong angle, right? Normally that'd be good if you had armor, but in this case, his angle is bad since it's allowing me to get a lot of full pens, or so I thought, if I was going to overmatch him. But it turns out it was just fine for this San Diego. That ship is a ship I plan on playing soon. I hope to get some videos out on it eventually, but it's a tier 8 Atlanta, but it doesn't get HE, so that's why he's using SAP. It's not a misplay by this San Diego, if you didn't know. It has only SAP and HE, or AP, sorry. SAP and AP. No high explosive on that thing, so it's a little difficult to deal damage to a Cherbourg in that case, but most of the ships you're going to be fighting will be able to sling that HE at you, and that's going to be a bit of a problem. We do manage to collect this cap here, and it does look like we're going to get a win, but the submarine is left to deal with, and again, trying to play next to islands so that I at least have a bit of a getaway. I unfortunately kind of whiffed my salvo there. I'm not sure how I only got one hit on the submarine there, and this, I don't know. I don't know where he is, but that little bit of wave effect isn't very accurate, I've been finding. So even though I thought I put it in a reasonably good spot, we get no hits, unfortunately. But a little later on, we're going to actually catch up to this submarine and hopefully deal with him. The other issue that submarines have is they can only launch torpedoes from the front, or in some cases from the back. So while this submarine is trying to get his nose pointed towards me, got my speed boost up, and I'm trying to cut across his bow. You see how that's making it very difficult for him to torp me? He pings me a little bit late, and I just damage con the ping so that those last couple torps don't home in on me. Not a bad result though, honestly. Tier 10, and kind of running around without really much direction this game. We got up to 74k. Definitely carried though by that insane Mogami salvo. I don't know how that happened. I haven't seen that dispersion since, I gotta be honest. And top XP in a tier 10 game. I'm saying this ship isn't very good, and yet I'm having some okay results. I don't know what to say. Other than that, just because it's doing all right in the base XP front doesn't mean it hasn't been a bit of a frustrating experience for me. Moving on to our last game of this video, we got tier 10 again. And after that decent salvo into the Venezia, I decided to make my way towards C, since we don't have a lot of presence at B. This ship, like I said, doesn't have a radar, it doesn't have high DPM, so I can't be going into little island chains by myself, where there might be destroyers, there might be subs trying to get a surprise strike off at me. So playing around my teammates, trying to support my DDs, you can see we have 2 DDs and a submarine over here, so trying to give the best support I can, but this game's really not looking so good. We're definitely stalled out here at C, and it seems like the enemy team is going to be winning A. It'll take them a little bit, but it seems like they might win that flank, so we do have to try and win this C flank, and I was hoping that a broadside Venezia would mean a little more damage than that, and I was really counting on dealing some decent damage to this guy so that we could actually push up, and maybe our DDs would be a little bit more aggressive without necessarily throwing their ships away. The second salvo does decent, and courtesy of that reload booster, we managed to get a second salvo. I really do think that this ship would be better off without a reload booster and just a better base reload. The gimmick of a reload booster can be very fun, but I think that it's just a little bit too long a reload on the Sherberg. It's It's just too much given the inconsistency of these guns. It doesn't have the overmatch of a battleship. It doesn't have the armor of a battleship at this tier either. And even though the guns are smaller, they're just as inconsistent as battleship guns at this tier. So for me, I would much prefer to have a Cherbourg without a reload booster, or maybe a few less charges with a longer reload in between them. If I was given maybe a little tighter dispersion or a little better base reload, I would much prefer that. I think there'd be a little more consistency there, and it would be a little bit less frustrating to play. At this point, we are triple capped, so not going great, but at least our team does have a numbers advantage, which we need to start pressing here. Since we have dealt with the Venezia, the enemy destroyer's gone down, and we can finally start to peek around this corner to deal with this Alaska. I'm not trying to overcommit here. Keep in mind we are bottom tier. This is still a tier 8. The HP pool can trick me into thinking this is a little higher tier ship, even the guns being a higher caliber. So it's a tier 8. I have to keep reminding myself of that, not only so that I manage my expectations, to keep in mind that tier 8 cruisers tend to not do well in tier 10 games anyway, and that I shouldn't be expecting 110, 130,000 damage out of this ship. It's a tier 8 only. It's hard for me to remember that, especially given some of the salvos we've seen. But as this Akizuki is rushing me, we pop our speed boost and reverse. This ship, as you've probably noticed, is very quick in reverse and forward. And with this build, I've actually taken the rudder shift upgrade, so the rudder shift is really good as well. And that's how I've been trying to dodge a lot of salvos. I think the best way to play this thing, though, has to be on flanks. Given that you're a tier 8, and you should generally be fighting against tier 8s, you shouldn't be up-tiered into tier 10s every time, I think taking this ship to a flank can be very useful. And most of the time, it'll net you some pretty decent games, but it's these tier 10 matches that it really struggles in. And honestly, what tier 8 doesn't? So I've been pretty frustrated, of course, with these last few games, but I'm hopeful that as I go up the tiers, as I get a better reload, maybe they get better dispersion. I actually don't think they do, but at least a better reload, I might enjoy these French cruisers a little bit more. But for now, I'm really not having a great time. Broadside Alaska, 5,000 damage for a 30-second reload. Sorry, 28, I believe. 28-second reload. Yeah, that's not so nice. At least I was able to pop my reload booster and get a second salvo out for this guy. And surprisingly enough, it's more damage, even though he was angled. So inconsistent at best. And even though we're down massively on points, we're in a decent spot to be able to come back and win this game. A lot of these games tend to go a little bit longer as, well, we're actually dealing pretty good damage and battle impact for our tier, trying to carry a little bit as bottom tier. It's difficult, but oh, we just lost 2 ships. And wait for it, there it is, 3 ships. It's not normal to see that many ships die all at once, so unfortunately that does mean we are gonna lose this game. And I tried to push in here at the end, but eventually we do end up just being in a crossfire. Take out the Lepanto, it's very good, but my teammates that are remaining are just a little too far back to really support me in this push, so I was caught in a crossfire between a Montana and this Alaska here, and, well, I just decided to back off. We're going to show you the Alaska fight, though, at least, since this is a little bit interesting. Similar caliber guns. I'm a tier lower, but, I mean, he does have more guns with a better reload, right? Unfortunately for him, I can actually just sit bow into him. And if we aim properly and get some good dispersion, I deal good damage. So there are some niche circumstances where this ship does shine. In a 1v1 against an Alaska, at least if he's kiting and has to go broadside to show his front guns at me, I'm going to do all right. I think in a bow-on versus bow-on fight, I would probably lose, but in this instant, especially because I have some teammates supporting me, we actually are able to do some decent damage to him. So that's kind of my thoughts on the Sherberg. I'm really conflicted. I have a very frustrating experience with the ship, and yet it's doing all right damage and XP values given that it's a tier 8 cruiser. It's not a tier 10, it's not a tier 9. It's a tier 8 with a heal and 50,000 HP and 305mm guns. There's probably some inconsistency that should be expected there alongside a long reload. And now we're going to get to the most awkward fight I think I've ever had in this game. Just to close things out on a bit of a funny note. This submarine, we do manage to dodge his torpedoes. Again, trying to use our maneuverability and timing our damage control. That's the really important thing. Timing your damage control to mitigate the ping, mitigate the homing effect, and that way maybe you can dodge some torps. That of course does rely on being a reasonably maneuverable ship. Battleships can't really do that as much. So I'd recommend with a battleship, try not to take a double flood. That's pretty important in a battleship. But yeah, we're just kind of sitting here waiting for this submarine to either run out of battery or I don't know, my teammates to reload their depth charges, since mine take a little while to reload. At least this thing does have plain depth charges. They're usually more useful. Although in this case, I wouldn't have minded another set of depth charges to drop off the back for this guy. The Curve First does take him out, which is good. And I had a little bit of hope of coming back into this game since the enemy team only has 2 ships remaining and we have 3. So if we do manage to catch out the Sherman, he's low. The Musashi, well, is a dangerous threat. We do have 2 battleships of same or higher tier. I was kind of hopeful. But that hope is dashed just a little bit here since the enemy Sherman plays this pretty well at the end. I'm going to try and cut across here to get behind this next island in the cap, and we get spotted. So unfortunately, I do have to angle, otherwise this Musashi is going to kill me. And because I decide to angle right in front of my friendly battleships, guess what's coming? Yeah, the Sherman torped at my friendly battleships. Who would have known, right? Even though Sherman doesn't have the best torps, yep, we're going to eat a Sherman torpedo. I'm ashamed to admit it, but there it is. It did happen. But 123k is a pretty good game for a tier 8 cruiser in a tier 10 game. Unfortunately, it's a loss, but again, like I said, decent results for a tier 8 cruiser. They're just frustrating in the moment while playing it, thanks to the inconsistency of the ship. As for the build on the Sherberg, I've been really not changing it at all. I think that this is a decent commander to have with concealment. I'm even taking survivability expert to boost our HP even a little bit more, but that would come later. I think superintendent's pretty important considering we can go through those reload boosters quite quickly, and we need to use our utility, our speed boost especially, to move around the map and catch people's broadsides. I think Adrenaline Rush is also a must. Since we have a lot of HP, we can play around half HP pretty comfortably. That gives us a 10% reload buff if we're on half HP, since Adrenaline Rush buffs us as we lose HP. Priority Target, I think, is quite necessary since you don't want to be taking battleship salvos, and it's nice to know how many people are targeting you as you're spotted. Gun Feeder's quite nice given the long reload, and sometimes it's important to switch to HE. You'll notice I probably made a mistake in that last game, not swapping to HE against the Akazuki that was yellowing me. Fortunately, I had some teammates to bail me out on that one, but it's important to swap sometimes to the high explosive. It's not that amazing, but it is better than the AP overall, I'd say on average, against destroyers, at least at closer ranges, when you can guarantee hits on the hull, not into their superstructure or module damage that really isn't going to do a whole lot. As for the upgrades, I really do enjoy steering gears on this thing. The amazing turning radius, you can see 670 meters, that's approaching destroyer levels, is pretty fun with a 10-second rudder shift. Without this, it feels a little sluggish still, but you could be running the propulsion mod, and that way you could speed juke a little more, but I've been relying on the engine boost to do that, and then using my steering gears to try and dodge as much as I can as well. I think aiming system's a must. I also think concealment system is a must on this thing. It's tough to play. It seems to be a inconsistent experience, like I said, but remember, it's tier 8, so it's competing against ships that don't have a heal and ships that certainly don't have 50,000 HP. At least the cruisers at this tier don't. So let me know what you think of this thing, and thanks for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day.